Just need to check to make sure that you guys can actually hear him.
We're living on a disk, floating through space, with a tiny sun.
Maybe down a little bit, it should be okay.
Hey, I'm FTFE, welcome back to the channel that does to stupidity what Einstein did to Newton's wand. Tonight is a big night, and I know it's one that a lot of you guys have been waiting for. It's been, we were just speaking about it, and it was 21st of March last year that Riley and I last spoke, so over a year ago. We are going to try and be as respectful as possible to each other. So I'm going to try and remain calm. There may be some digs here and there, but hopefully that will all be in good fun, and I will expect it back to me as well. But I do want to say, Riley, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me.
No worries, it's a pleasure. Just so that the audience are aware, like it was requested that it was like a not a monetized hangout, because I think that there's a lot of money floating around at the minute, and it's not doing anybody any good, in my opinion. I just want to verify that's going to stay the same. It's not going to be monetized, right?
No, super chats are off, and I have turned off advertising revenue for the video. So this video will not be monetized at all in any way.
Excellent.
Excellent. And you know what? That was a fair enough request for you to talk to me. So I was happy to make that concession to make this happen, because I know that you've overcome a lot of the things that you think about me to actually have this conversation. So I was happy to do that and to try and make this a thing, because I know people on both sides of the argument, on your side and my side, they want to see this happen.
Sure. I mean, I'm good to go, mate. Do you want to lead, or should I lead?
Well, just before we get started, I know most of my audience probably know who you are, but do you just want to take a second to introduce yourself, tell them what it is you do and where to find you on YouTube?
I kind of got into this through pyramids about 4 years ago. I'm not satisfied that we're living on a sphere. There's not enough good evidence of it. I'm sure most of you know who I am, and I'm just going to get the digs for it, but it's Sleeping Warrior. I'm just not satisfied that we're living on a sphere, and I've not got enough evidence to accept that it's true. So here I am. Okay,
fair enough. So the main crux of the argument, well, between you and I anyway, is gravity, right?
Yeah, I mean, gravity is my favourite topic, and I think it's probably yours. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I want to address is that you've quite often called me a liar for my view of gravity and the way that I describe it. And I kind of want to address that briefly. I'm not having a go at you, but to explain why I say that it's a force. We all agree and we all know that it's not a physical force. There's not something physically there. When I say the force of gravity, I literally mean what can be calculated based on the acceleration that we observe, which is what Newton was all about. He observed this acceleration and came up with his universal law of gravitation. And despite what Einstein has said, that acceleration that we can experience and measure has never gone away, which is why I call it the force of gravity. It's not a physical force, but in all physics, in the physics that I studied when I went to uni, in the physics that I even did at high school, we're taught to think of it as a force, because for practical purposes it is. So I'm not lying, I'm literally going with what I've been taught and what I understand.
Well, would you agree that the definition for lying is it's two-tailed, it's false statement of fact with the intention to deceive? Would you agree with that definition?
Yeah, with the intention to deceive, absolutely.
Sure. Now, what's your current sub count? About 20, 30,000 people?
About 31,500, I think.
So, am I right in saying that your current position is that you still push that gravity is a force, or have you changed your position from the last time? I know you kind of conflate between the two of them at times.
Oh, no, I don't think I've changed my position. I've tried to refine the way that I describe it. I still say that, yes, gravity can be considered a force when you're talking about Newtonian classical physics and engineering. Anything around engineering, you have to kind of think of it as a force. Yeah, that's not physically what it is. Now, the way that I've started to describe it is you can describe the force as an emergent property of what Einstein described of the warping of space-time. And by emergent, I mean a consequence of something else. So you say that Einstein says that gravity is an effect, right? Now, I can kind of agree with that, but there's no reason why an effect can also be the cause of something else.
Well, let me just finish off with the lie bit first, because
Okay.
if it is a false statement of fact, and if we now seem to agree that at least superficially it's not actually a force, then every time that you tell your audience that gravity is a real effect or a real thing, and it does exist, and all the descriptions that you give, it does seem dishonest, because it does seem that you're leading your audience to believe that gravity is a thing, an attribute, something that exists. And it seems that you're making them think that it is the Newtonian the Newtonian form of a pull. Now, if that is true, and I assert that it is, you are misleading your audience into thinking something that's not actually true. That would satisfy the definition of telling a lie, because it's a false position, and you're being at least slack with the word, because everybody thinks that gravity is a force when they hear you talking, and that when you, especially when you ridicule or berate flat earthers. I have heard you do it with lots of people. I couldn't name them now, and I've not watched most of your content unless someone gives me a link. But I have heard you referring to it as a force, and I can't help but think that that's an intentional thing, because you know it's not. George Musa even told you gravity's not literally a force, but
Yeah.
we can think of it as a force. And he also said that we must think of Newtonian gravity to be a force. That doesn't really mean it is a force, but we don't really have to work at the really is level.
Yeah,
He was telling you it's not a force, but you still push that it's a force.
but as I explained, I'm not saying it's a physical force. I'm saying that the force that is calculable, the thing that Newton described with the law of gravitational attraction, can still be thought of. And George is right; it has to be thought of as a force, especially when you're thinking about engineering. You're building a bridge. You need to think of that force of gravity in your calculations when you're trying to figure out the loads that the bridge will be able to take. So, yeah, we all know that when you get down to the deeper levels of science, it's not a physical force, it's a result of something else. That doesn't mean that for practical purposes and for classical mechanics, we can't treat it as a force, because it's imperative that we do. Because if we didn't, most engineering wouldn't work.
Well, I mean, I can see the distinguishing point when you say that Newtonian gravity. Well, yeah, I think that we all understand that Newtonian gravity used to be a force, but it's been replaced by Einsteinian gravity that makes it an effect. Now, I know that you don't like the word supersede, but the reality is it isn't considered to be, in current physics, it is not considered to be a force. So if it's not a force, what is it? And it's defined, and we do know the cause of it because Einstein gave it us.
Yeah.
It's the effect of the curvature of space-time caused by the uneven distribution of mass. Do
Yeah.
you now accept that that is the current position in physics?
That is the current position in physics, and I've always agreed with that. But that goes back to my point of that doesn't take away the calculable force. Einstein just described why there appears to be a calculable force. Einstein explained, like you said, that it's the curvature of space-time, right? He described gravity as the curving of space-time due to the uneven distribution of mass. Now, the effect of that is that it causes what appears to be an attractive force between objects, because the warping of space-time makes things move towards it. And that causes an acceleration, and F equals ma. If there's mass and an acceleration, that means that we can calculate a force, which is why it goes back to, for practical purposes, for engineering purposes, we have to consider it a force because of the way that it acts on things. You know, we have to think of the acceleration acting down when we're calculating fuel needed for a plane to fly, because it's all, you know, it all acts on the plane. So yes, the current position of physics is what Einstein gave us, that it is the warping of space-time. by the uneven distribution of mass, but the effect of that is what appears to be an attractive force.
So when it's, when Einstein describes it as the effect of the curvature of space-time,
Yeah.
do you agree that when he says that we perceive it as a force because there is an object appears to be curving, do you agree that it isn't actually curving, it's space-time that's warping in his model? And that warping of the space-time, is the bending of the fabric of space-time, is causing what we perceive to be a curve, but it's not actually curving. It's only a perspective it's an interpretation from our perspective. Do you agree that's how Einstein describes it?
Well, Einstein described it as an acceleration, right? The equivalence principle, he said that an acceleration is indistinguishable from gravity. And he
described it as the perception of an acceleration, but it's actually the warping of space-time that we perceive.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the equivalence principle that Einstein talked about. The effects of gravity are indistinguishable from the effects of an acceleration. Do you agree with that?
No, he says the effects of the curvature of space-time is what we perceive as an acceleration.
Yeah.
But it's not actually accelerating because it's not curving, it's following a straight path. Because it goes back to Newton's laws of motion, right? An object in motion will remain in motion unless acted upon by a force.
Yeah.
Well, if gravity's not a force and there's an object in motion, then it's not accelerating. It's maintaining a constant velocity, and it isn't changing its direction. So it's maintaining a constant velocity, but Einstein says that the curvature of space-time creates the perception that it's orbiting somewhere from our world, but it's not actually orbiting, it's just warping space-time. That's how he describes it.
So objects want to move in a straight line. If they're given a vector, then they're going to continue on that vector unless there's another force, an uneven force applied in the opposite way, right? Now,
but if space-time around it gets warped, then we perceive that warping of space-time as the object orbiting. Yeah, but it's not actually orbiting, right? It's the curvature of space-time that gives that perception to us. Do you agree?
It's not really a perception. The curvature of space-time is a real, measurable, detectable thing.
The curvature of space-time is a real, measurable thing. Did you say?
Yeah, the predictions behind the curvature of space-time have been experimentally verified. So if you
can I ask what you mean when you say space-time?
I mean the 4 dimensions of space-time. The 3 dimensions of space and the 1 dimension of time. That the universal material. That's what Einstein was describing as space-time, right? And an uneven distribution of mass will warp that material. Now, the effect of the warp and curve of the universe is that other objects move or orbit along these curves. The same as if you get a trampoline and you put a big bowling ball in the middle of the trampoline, right? And it causes a depression in the material of the trampoline. And you push a marble to the side of it, it's going to orbit it because the material is warped towards the big mass. That's what space-time is, but on in 3 dimensions. So when
Craig,
Craig,
can I just check what your sound position is? You seem to be chopping, and I don't know if it's because your gate's high or is it because there's a bad connection. Have you got your gate?
I'm not sure. There shouldn't be a gate on my Discord, and I'm not getting any choppy on my side. 1 sec, let me just go into the Discord settings to check.
Yeah, it's definitely chopping on my side. It might be me. I don't know if it's a Discord thing or...
Possibly a Discord thing, no. There's no gate or anything on my audio at all.
Okay, I'll just try and pick up on what I thought you... I asked you if you could just answer shortly, because I didn't quite catch what you said.
Right, okay.
I said, what do you think space-time is?
It's the fabric of the universe, for want of a better word.
Is it a real thing, or is it a conceptual thing that exists in maths? It's
a real thing. It's been experimentally demonstrated to be a real thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So, I mean, as far as I can see, I can screen share if you want to see, but space-time's conceptual. It's the mathematical representation of the fabric that is Einstein's linchpin. It's his foundation for his model.
Okay. So Einstein, he had theories and maths, but since he came up with the theories and the maths, a lot of his predictions have been experimentally verified, which is what you do, right? You observe something, you make a hypothesis, You design an experiment to test the hypothesis, and you look at the results. You see if it disproves what your hypothesis was, and that's what they did. They took Einstein's observations and his hypothesis around his maths, and they tested it, and it turned out to be true.
Okay, so bearing in mind that my perspective at this point is that space-time's conceptual and it exists in mathematics only. It doesn't actually exist real world, it's conceptual, right? I'll use the phrase Narnia so that you understand where I'm at. You said that there's been experimental validation for Einstein's general relativity.
Yeah.
Experimental validation is a big key. You know that's a dirty word, right? I'm going to jump all over that, right?
Explain why.
Well, experimental is part of the definition for science, isn't it? If you have the definition, I mean, I'll get it on my screen for my own. I was planning on screen sharing, Craig, but I don't see how I was screen sharing this. Do you know how to do it? There we go.
Yeah, you just click on the turn on screen share underneath our voices, then I can bring that up on my screen as well.
Yeah, it's not, for some reason, it's not spotting my other window.
Discord can be dodgy. Have you got two monitors or just the one?
No, two. Turn on screen share.
And it's only seeing the one monitor, right?
Yeah, I'll have to send you a screenshot. That's the best way of doing it.
Yeah, if you could send me a screenshot, I'll bring that up that way.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I have that issue with Discord as well. It does do that, you're right.
It would help if I found the thing that I wanted first. What was I saying then? Space-time.
So your position is that space-time is purely conceptual, right?
No. Bear with me. So when you say the word experiments, that's a key trigger word for me, because that is one of the key words that we look for. So now what I'm going to do, get rid of that. Don't save. Snipping tool. I'm going to send it to you so you can see it, because this is like a key word. And I want to be clear on this, because if you're going to say the word experiment, then that's something that's very much on my radar. So if I paste that into there, you should now get that for your audience. Let me know when you see it.
Yeah, give me 1 second. Let me just download that so that I can show it to my audience. Downloads. Yeah. Right, just for my audience, guys, this is the screenshot that Riley has sent me. Let me just get that up. Okay, go on.
So all it says is that there's many definitions. Science is one of those words that's defined everywhere, but none of them are the same. But they do all have a common theme, and the word experiment is the word that's commonly cited in most definitions. Now, you can go, and by the way, Merriam-Webster's dictionary seems to be a very, very unusual dictionary. It's not consistent with a lot of things. A lot of dictionaries will self-support each other. Merriam-Webster doesn't seem to support a lot of dictionaries when it comes to certain words in this topic, and it's almost as if Merriam-Webster is ran by the rumpus. I'm not saying it's true, but it's definitely a possibility.
We can both agree that words have multiple meanings, right?
Yeah, but the precise in science, though, right? In science, words have got precise meanings in science. So when it says hypothesis and it's a cause and effect relationship demonstration,
yeah,
that's what it means, cause and effect, right? It doesn't mean just a story or a guess.
No.
Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
So when it says experiment, I mean, the key part of an experiment, or the key part of science, is to validate what you think's causing something, right?
Yeah, I'll agree with that. The experiment to test a hypothesis is an important part of science. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that.
So with regards to gravity and Einstein, he says that it's the effect of the curvature of space-time caused by the uneven distribution of mass.
Yeah.
Well, if the cause is the uneven distribution of mass and the effect is the curvature of space-time, that's basically, he's telling us the cause and the effect. So in science, if we're going to do an experiment to validate general relativity, he kind of defines the parameters of the hypothesis for us, because he gives us what would be the independent variable and he gives us the dependent variable. The independent variable would be the uneven distribution of mass, and then the dependent variable would be causing the warping of space-time. Would you agree with that?
Let me just think that for a sec. So
Sure.
the independent variable would be the uneven distribution of mass. So the amount of mass, you're saying?
Yeah, the uneven distribution of mass, like planets and
Yeah.
black holes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
They would
so-
be the uneven distribution of mass, and they cause the curvature, the effect of the curvature of space-time, right?
Which would be the dependent variable.
The effect.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with that.
Cool. Now, when you say that they've been experimentally verified,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? Because we're going to have some experiments.
So
that
Einstein's predictions around relativity predicted that certain things would happen, right? So the large masses would warp space-time in a certain way. So they tested this when the first one was 1919. Sir Arthur Eddington performs the first experimental test of Albert Einstein's general theory of relativity. It was an eclipse that they used to measure if light would bend based on Einstein's predictions and the curvature of space-time. And that was one of the first experimental evidence that supported Einstein's hypothesis around the observations.
But it's limited to just observation only, though. Where's the actual experiment part to it?
Experiments can be observed. An experiment can be to observe something that is happening. And if you can change the times and stuff that happens, and you can observe different things, then you can change the independent variables around it. But observation can be what an experiment is based around. If you are observing something that is happening in nature and it is matching the predictions that you get, you're using nature to do the experiment to see if the hypothesis is correct. So observations can be an experiment.
So observation is part of scientific method. It gives you your dependent variable, the effect. That's the thing that you're trying to prove the cause of, right?
Yeah.
But if you make an observation, oh look, my gravimeter seems to be fluctuating if I go to different parts of the Earth. I wonder what might be causing that. And then you put a load of lead weights under the ground, and then you say, gee, it's because of these lead weights that I've put under the ground. And then you're correlating the cause with something to do with the lead weights that you've planted under the ground, and you're correlating.
But now let's take that a bit further. Like Tony, the PhD that I know you dislike, his job is to use gravimeters and stuff, right? So if they were to do what you said and to see, all right, so if I stick these lead weights underneath, then it creates the readings. Now, how would you then see if that is valid? You would change the independent variable, which in that case would be the amount of mass, right? So maybe you would go to a different place with a known material underneath and see what the effects are there. And then it's not just correlation to the lead weights. It is using a changing independent variable to constantly try to disprove the hypothesis. And if, for instance, you went to a place where you had a larger density and the gravimeter showed the opposite of what you thought, then that would have disproved the hypothesis that the mass was, the amount of mass and density was the thing that was causing the spring to stretch in a certain way. But what you find is wherever you go with the gravimeter, it detects the right thing. It's so accurately that you can detect certain minerals, and companies pay Tony to do that. So it's not just correlating, it confirms it constantly by being in different places with a different independent variable.
Well, the thing is, it is correlating it, because if you remember when Spurs asked what was the independent variable, and I've got it on screen for my audience, but I've got him quoted, he said, quote, non-uniform density distributions below the Earth's surface. That's what he said, right?
Yeah.
So that was his presumed cause. And when Spurs tried to ask him, well, how did you manipulate that? You then answered for him and said, well, you'd stand in other parts of the world. And then Spurs said, yeah, but I didn't hear him say that. How would you manipulate that? And he started getting really aggressive unnecessarily. Now, the reason for him in getting aggressive...
I think that's more my fault than anything. I have a problem with not jumping in. I just wanted to kind of get that point. The thing about Tony is, although he's an expert in his field, he isn't used to talking to you guys. He doesn't understand your arguments.
No, that was obvious, and Spurs did really, really well at not only controlling his temper, he did really well at being extremely polite and concise with asking him, well, how did you manipulate the presumed cause? Now, the problem is, rather than say, I don't know, or give an answer, because he attacked back, that is basically not answering the question that was asked and attacking instead of saying, I don't know, or giving an answer, or just refusing to answer. But by attacking back, he didn't actually answer the question. But the problem with that is we know that he can't answer the question because whatever's causing his gravimeter to do something, we know that he can't manipulate it. So if he's going to say it's gravity, because he said right at the beginning of his hangout, didn't he? He says, I am demonstrating that gravity is a pulling force. Well, even if the Newtonian gravitation was considered to be the current position in science, and even if mass did attract mass, he's never ever going to be able to manipulate it to prove that it's true, because you can't manipulate gravity. So it's always outside of scientific method. It's always outside of experiment because you can't manipulate the independent variable. We've been trying to get this through to you guys for the longest of times, and it never seems to get through. But this guy doesn't realize that he can't manipulate it. Well, because he can't manipulate it, it means that he can only correlate.
But isn't changing the position on Earth, like I said, manipulating the independent variable by changing the distribution of density underneath? Isn't that literally manipulating the IV?
Okay, so let's try applying that, right? Let's say he goes to the Gobi Desert and he puts his gravimeter out and he goes, yep, there's definitely a pull here on this spring and it measures X. And then we plonk him at another part of the world, and let's just say, for argument's sake, it's the North Pole, and he gets a different reading on the spring. What other variables have changed whilst he's gone from the Gobi Desert to the North Pole? Well, there's temperature, there's pressure, there's the humidity in the atmosphere. So all those three things, maybe, but those things are influencing the results. So there's more than one variable being changed. Now, in scientific method, you've got to try and control them so that you only manipulate the one thing. Now, if he goes to the North Pole, forget about all the other variables, forget about all the other things that have been changed. Just the rotation of the Earth on your model would change that output, wouldn't it? It would change the effect.
0.5%. Obviously the lack of centrifugal force at the poles and being slightly closer to the center of the Earth does increase the emergent force of gravity by about 0.5%, I think. So if you aid, sorry, go on.
Yeah, but would you agree though that when you're trying to do a scientific experiment, the things that are not the independent variable would be controls, and they're the things that you need to try and keep constant as best as you can, or at least compensate for them with your hypothesis. Because let's be honest, if you were up in Gobi Desert and then to the North Pole, you're never going to be able to control the humidity and the temperature because they're vastly different. But we know that springs will contract and stretch in different temperatures. But we also know that there's going to be an effect with like humidity, and there's also going to be a change with pressure. There's also going to be a change with rotation of the Earth on your model. So they're all things that need to be controlled. So if you change your location, and obviously I'm being extreme to make the point, but even if you just go to like the adjacent country that's in a different climate, or even different weather on different days, they're going to affect the readings that you get on your gravimeters. And you can't. That's why you've got to manipulate it. You can't switch it on and off like he wanted to say, because that doesn't prove it either. It might have an effect on it, but it might not be the only cause. But at least if you manipulate your presumed cause, like I did with my egg, I added a little bit of mass to the water, and then it did something. Now, you can argue about what it did, but there's no dispute that when I manipulated something, it made the egg move, right? Now, you guys obviously say it's gravity, and I say it's just adding mass to the liquid. But it did cause something, and it was the only thing that changed, because it did it all in that window of a short... Nothing else changed.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's disagreeing that when you added the salt, something happened. Obviously, our claim in that case is you altered one of the variables of the buoyancy equation. Which no one's denying that you physically putting the salt in caused something to happen, but then we need to look at the deeper reasons for that, right? It's like if I said to you, what happened?
Because scientific method tells us.
Let me ask a question first. If I said to you, turn on your light switch, and what happens? Your light turns on, right? Does that mean?
But you give me an example of technology here, though.
That doesn't. It's irrelevant. Technology is still science.
It isn't. If you conflate technology, you're making an error.
This is a big thing that you guys get very, very wrong. In science, when they say about natural world, they don't mean not man-made. They mean not supernatural. This is something you guys always get very, very wrong. You can absolutely apply science to man-made things. There's no reason why you can't do that. Like when quantum eraser was...
Science is trying to stop... Craig, science is trying to establish the cause of an effect. If there's a man-made thing like a car, what do you think's caused that man-made thing? The car. The man's made it. The man's made it, right?
Yeah, that's not really the point, though, is it? Like, for instance, when Quantum Eraser was going over my debate with Nathan Thompson, talking about the Coriolis force, he said that I couldn't apply the Coriolis force to a man-made projectile. Do you agree with that?
Well, if the man's made it, then it's got fins, it's got an element of lift or drop in it, it's got bad designs, good designs. There's all the elements that control the projectile are man-made. You know the cause.
Yeah,
good design, bad design.
Yeah, but if there is still a drift, that just because it's man-made, does that mean, like, let's just say it's a completely smooth projectile with no fins or anything, it's just been fired north from the equator, does that mean that I can't then say the Coriolis force will affect it? Because it's man-made?
Well, the problem you're trying to demonstrate is that the Coriolis force is being applied to a man-made piece of equipment. That you've got to demonstrate that the man-made piece of equipment would be rotating and that there's an apparent drift. But how do you apply Coriolis to the man-made equipment, the man-made missile, if the man-made missile's not spinning?
The missile doesn't need to be spinning; it just needs to be firing in a reference frame. Like, my point is that if the object is fired directly from the equator north, right, and it is just a completely smooth projectile flying through the air, it's a freely moving object, does that mean that then it's not affected by the Coriolis because it's man-made? That's a ridiculous thing to say. Of course, science can deal with man-made technological things. The problem is that you guys say natural means not man-made when that is wrong. Natural means not supernatural. So I can absolutely talk about technology in the realms of science.
Yeah, but it's a trilogy. There's another word that you missed off, and that's synthetic. Natural is the opposite of supernatural, but it's also the opposite of synthetic. That would be man-made, right?
Yeah, but in science, we that's what we mean. When we say natural, we mean not supernatural. That is what it means in science. That is what we're talking about. To say that we can't apply science to technology and man-made things is a ridiculous statement.
The thing is, if you're going to say that it doesn't include synthetic stuff that's man-made, well, if you're going to argue that running a car, putting a key in, what would be the cause then in your starting up of a car? Is it pressing the alarm to get into it, opening the door?
Let's go back to the example of the light switch, right? So you press the light switch and your light comes on. Does that mean that the cause of the light coming on is you pressing the light switch? Or did you pressing the light switch make other things happen? Did it connect a circuit that allowed a current to come from outside of your house to connect that in turn was generated in a solar power station 500 miles away? It's not just that you pressing that switch wasn't what caused the light to come on. It started something.
The light, Craig, the light wouldn't have come on if you hadn't pressed the switch.
But it isn't just the physical act of pressing the switch that caused the light to come on. What caused the light to come on was allowing current to flow through a circuit.
Right, so there's two problems here, right? So let me deal with both. Just responding like when I've done both.
Okay.
I've sent you a link that you might want to put onto your audience. This is the University of... I can't remember which one it is. It's linked at the top. What science is not technology. One of the mistakes that Craig is making is thinking that science is to confuse it with technology. As a result, science often receives undue credit for the miracles of modern science in one's kitchen, or undue blame for everything from overly firm tomatoes to nuclear war. In fact, science doesn't make things. Scientists developed the understanding of radiation sufficient for the invention of the microwave oven, but neither making the microwave oven nor using it are science. You can conflate that with turning on the light switch and making all the wires and putting them in a house and all that. Just because there's a system that works does not mean it's science. Now, you're trying to make science out of switching on a light bulb. That's the same as arguing that microwaves are science, and they're not. The technology, they use science, but they're not science themselves.
Yeah, but
So
that doesn't mean you can't apply scientific principles to things that are made. And that's my argument, is that to say that a natural effect cannot affect a man-made thing is a ridiculous statement, right? Science was used to develop the microwave, as it says. You know, the microwave itself isn't science, but science went into developing how our microwave works. Science went into figuring out how much energy you need to heat the water molecules in the food to be able to eat it properly. Science went into creating that.
You just said it. The microwave is not science. Well, in the same, if you agree that the microwave's not science, you have to accept that the light switch and the generation of the power at the power plants and the circuitry around the house, that's also not science. It's the technology and the skill of electronics, right? It's not science.
Yeah. So how would you test, how would you test the strength of a magnetic field, for instance? In your version of science, how would I determine the strength of a magnetic field based on something that was running? How would I do that?
Why would you think that measuring the strength of a magnetic field is science? It's a measurement, right? We can measure how fast cars go. We can measure how hot something is. That in itself isn't science.
But so what about the question of what causes a magnetic field to increase? What about the question of what causes a magnetic field in general? How do you test that? How do you manipulate the thing that you want to test?
Right, so let's take an example of something that we know that is magnetic, that we can increase its magnetism on. The big junkyard or scrapyard, like electromagnets that they put on cranes and they stick them on the roof of the car. They press the button and it current through.
Electromagnets are a great example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So what causes it? Well, for a start, man made it, right? So it doesn't happen in the real world. So it wouldn't actually be science, would it? Because we created it. But if we saw something like that in the real world and you go, I wonder why that's sticking to that. And you worked out it was because of piezoelectricity caused by the running river nearby. And then you stopped the river from running. And then you could say, hey, actually, that stopped moving that thing then. And that was the cause. It was the flowing water through the river nearby that was creating piezoelectricity, which created the current, which amplified the magnetism in that locality. That would be science. Because you're establishing what causes that increase.
Well, yeah, especially to say that you can't do science on something man-made is still wrong. Technology isn't science. Technology was created by science. There is scientific technology, and science was used to create technology. But that doesn't mean you can't do science and create a hypothesis around man-made things.
So this is where I'll read my final sentence. It says on that link I sent you, it says, in short, science often leads to technology and it often uses technology, but it isn't technology, and in fact can operate quite independently of technology. We use technology all the time. We measure things all the time, but that doesn't make it science.
Right. Okay. But it goes back to my question of how would you, so let's just say you came across an electric generator, right? You didn't know what it was, and you pressed the button and it turned on, and there was a magnetic field. How would you do tests to determine what was causing that magnetic field, or would you not be able to?
And what was the scenario, the setup?
You've just come across an electric generator. You don't know what it is. Let's just say you're an alien. You've never been here before. Whether aliens exist or not is irrelevant. Okay, and you just come across an electric generator, right? You press a button and it creates an electric, a magnetic field. How would you determine what was going on?
So there's a real world example that we can talk about of technology that we find and we don't know what it does, right? You've come across, there's numerous examples, but let's go with the pyramids, for example. You realize the pyramids are not tombs, right?
Well, I don't really know about exactly what the pyramids were, but they were definitely tombs in the pyramids.
No, there was never any dead bodies in the pyramids. All right, that's a bad example. If you don't realize they're not tombs, then we can't go with that. If we find a piece of technology, right, a motor or something, and we don't know what it does, and we've never seen it before, why would you think that would be science when somebody's clearly made it to do a task? it's not naturally occurring in the physical and natural world, is it? It's in the definition.
It doesn't have to be occurring in the physical and natural world to be science. And yeah, we can go back to your definition, Riley, and it says science is not technology. But again, that does not mean that you cannot do science on technology or with technology. You know, if I wanted to figure out how to adjust the electric field, generate the magnetic field generated by an electric generator, I would have to do tests to figure out how many coils of wire were needed around the induction coil to, and have the electric current going around it to induce that field. I would have to experiment and do science to figure out what A was causing the magnetic field, and B how to adjust it and what was causing it to be adjusted. You can do science on technology, and you can have science with man-made things.
You can't, Craig.
You can.
What you're arguing, you can't, because it's clear. Science is that I'll read it. The intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and the behaviour, and then it says, of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. Let's just say we've got observation and experiment sorted. We're arguing over the meaning of the words physical and natural, right?
Yeah.
Physical means it exists, and then natural, it's the opposite of synthetic, and it's the opposite of supernatural. It's not just the supernatural that's excluded, it's the opposite of synthetic as well.
No, it's not. In science, they're not talking about excluding synthetic things. It's as simple as that, Riley. You are wrong with that claim. Science, when we say the physical and natural world, we simply mean physical things that are not supernatural. So we're not looking at things like God or miracles. We're not. Yeah. That's not what science is about. That word natural there literally means not supernatural and nothing else in that context.
Okay, so I'm going to use Brenda's example. Do you know what example I'm going to cite now from Brenda?
Possibly. I've not had that much interaction with Brenda.
The shoe. The shoe is a man-made thing that you put on your foot, right? And it protects your soles from punctures from glass and whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a man-made device. Do we need to do science to establish the cause and the effect of the shoe? Or do we accept that it's man-made, so you don't need to even see that there was a fact, you don't need to know where or what country it was made in. You know that the shoe was man-made, and no matter where it was made, there was somebody somewhere that created it. So the cause of the shoe was some system that some man made somewhere, and the effect was we've got a shoe. We don't need to do science on it because we already know that it's caused by man.
How do you then replicate that? How do you get another shoe to test and verify against? I mean, it's a bit of a strange example using a shoe, but if you wanted to then determine the limits of the shoe, or how far the shoe would walk before the sole ran out, and how to make the same shoe based on the materials, you would have to do scientific experiments to determine those things.
These things are not scientific. These things are created by man. They are designed and created with technology.
You missed my point. If I wanted to determine something about the shoe, like how long it's going to last before the sole wears out, I would have to perform a scientific experiment to do that.
How? A scientific experiment is a hypothesis test.
Yeah.
It establishes the cause of an effect. If you want to test the durability of a shoe, yeah, you can do some testing on it, but it won't be a science test that you'll be doing. It's a durability test to see how far whatever it was that you said.
No,
but science is
you're wrong, because you have to test a lot of things. You would have to test the types of materials it could go on. You would have to test the temperatures that it could cope with. You would have to alter a lot of the variables and test a lot of things. And it would be a scientific experiment. The observation could be that after 30 miles of walking in the desert, that shoe, the sole went away. Right? Now, my hypothesis is that the sole was worn away by walking in the desert. I would have to then design and perform an experiment to test that hypothesis. That is a scientific experiment. A scientific experiment can be done on anything, any question, any observation that you have. You can create a scientific experiment to try and disprove the hypothesis that you've created. It doesn't matter if it's a man-made thing or not. Honestly, Riley, it is a claim that you guys need to stop making, because natural simply means not supernatural, not man-made.
No, right. So definition of experiment and then definition of hypothesis. An experiment is a procedure carried out to support, refute, or validate a hypothesis. Experiments provide insight into cause and effect by demonstrating what outcome occurs when a particular factor is manipulated. Now, in the experiment, you have the hypothesis. The hypothesis is the expression of a cause and effect relationship. We're not interested in the durability of something. We're not interested in the cost effectiveness or the efficiency of something. We're just trying to establish the cause of an effect. That's it. Anything else that goes beyond that is pretty, poetry, lovely, whatever, and it's good design, it's good technology, it's whatever you want it to be, but it's not science. We don't need to. We need to stop you guys from using it as a conflating tool to confuse people.
But we're not. That's right. We're not the ones that are
science.
We're not the ones that are confusing it and conflating it. We're using it correctly. We are applying the scientific method the way it's supposed to be applied, and the part of the scientific method is to test, like you said, and to test you need to have a hypothesis, and the hypothesis is basically a question about the cause and effect. What caused that? So let's go back to the example of the shoe. After 30 miles, like I said, the shoe has worn out, the sole's gone, right? That's an observation that I've just made, okay? Now, my hypothesis, okay, what's wrong with that?
Well, the thing is, you know what the cause was because you just walked 30 miles in them, right? And
that's an assumption. That's an assumption you've just made. The science doesn't make assumptions like that, right? Yes, my observation is that after 30 miles, the sole on the shoe wore out, okay? So my hypothesis in that case is that the act of walking 30 miles with that shoe in the desert caused the sole to wear out, right? That's my hypothesis. That is the cause of the effect of the sole wearing out is walking 30 miles in it. So I now need to design an experiment to test that cause of the effect, right?
Craig, listen, it's a false dichotomy to claim that it's only physical and natural, but not supernatural.
No, it's not.
It's a trichotomy.
That is the fact of how it is, Riley. And you guys need to stop getting it wrong. In science, natural means not supernatural, not man-made. You guys are getting it wrong. That is the end of the discussion about that. That's literally how it is. And you try to use dictionary definitions to argue about science when science is already defined in certain ways. And people that know science, people that have studied science and physics, like me and like Tony Purcell and like anyone that has taken a physics course, knows that this is the way it works.
Listen, you're making a false dichotomy. It's a trichotomy. You have to include synthetic in your discussion.
No, you don't, because that's not what it means.
Yeah, it does.
No, it really doesn't. It really doesn't. Riley, no matter how many times you say it, you're wrong. It does not mean not synthetic. It doesn't mean that. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You're wrong. You are wrong. Right. No matter how many times you say it, you're wrong.
Let's move on, because we're spending a long time on this. We don't agree, but I don't think it changes anything on gravity. Let's move forward. Right. Where were we with gravity?
I'm getting myself back on you a bit there.
We were talking about we talked about space-time, and I said that it was conceptual. I remember that bit. And you said it was definitely a real thing.
Oh, yeah, because it's been tested.
Oh, yeah, so we got to the experimental part. So we were talking about experimental, right? Yeah. So, okay, so you mentioned Eddington. And we all know what Eddington's observation was. He spotted he said that if Einstein was right, we would see the emergence of a star from behind the sun during a solar eclipse. And what do you know? We see it.
Yeah.
Would you agree that that's observation? That's part of it? But where's the experiment bit? Where's the demonstration?
Observation or experimentation, an experimentation, it can be either. An experiment can be an observation, Riley, as I explained.
How, when it hasn't got any independent variable that's manipulated?
It does. The independent variable could be the time and the place of what they're doing.
Time and place can't be an independent variable, do you?
We've been there. We've been this before. Time can be an independent variable. In fact, in most cases, when you use time in science, it is an independent variable.
Time has never caused anything in any test ever.
Incorrect. Time in science is most of the time an independent variable. That is a fact of science. You will not find me one citation that disagrees with that.
Time doesn't even exist. The only thing that exists with regards to time is the passage of time. But time itself doesn't cause anything.
The passage of time is time.
Time is time, yeah. It's time.
The passage of time is time. And the passage of time can be an independent variable.
One example. Give me one example of where time caused anything.
I've done this with you before, right? I want to make an experiment to figure out what the perfect cup of tea is for me, right?
Okay.
So, I get 5 cups in front of me, and I put tea bags in, and the only thing I change in each of the cups is the amount of time that the tea bag has been in the water. Time, in that case, is the independent variable.
No, the independent variable was you creating the cup of tea. Remember, a hypothesis test is what science is trying to do. It's an experiment. Your hypothesis
and what would the question be around the cup of tea?
What's the cause of an effect? So the cause of your perfect cup of tea was you, because you made it. Now, there's other factors that go into it with the right amount of milk and the right temperature and all that.
No, right, that's all so wrong. The cause of the perfect cup of tea is the amount of time I left the bag brewing. I put the tea bags in all 5 of them, right?
No, Craig, that's not true. There are several factors that make a tea.
In this experiment that I'm talking about, right? I don't take sugar, I don't take milk. I just want to know how long it takes for me to have the perfect cup of tea. My observation is that the longer the tea bag's in, the stronger it is, right? So I want to test if that's the case. I want to see if leaving the tea bag in for longer causes it to get stronger. So I get 5 cups of tea, and the only thing I change is the amount of time a tea bag is in each cup of tea. I have manipulated time in that experiment.
Yeah, you have manipulated time. Well, not really. You haven't manipulated time. You've manipulated the duration of time by putting the bag in for longer and shorter. But here's the thing, Craig, you're not understanding what an experiment is. It's a hypothesis test to establish the cause of an effect, not the perception of the best cup of tea. Yeah, there's factors that go into making the tea, the temperature, the right size cup and all that. Who cares? The cause of making the perfect cup of tea was you.
No, the cause of the perfect cup of tea was the time the tea bag was left in there.
No, there's several causes.
So if the cause of me making the perfect cup of tea, one of them isn't going to be perfect. I didn't change me. I stayed exactly the same. Riley, the only thing that changed in that experiment is the amount of time that the tea bags were in the cup. Therefore, the thing that I am manipulating is time. Therefore, time is the independent variable, because the amount of time the tea bag is in the water is the cause of the effect of the tea getting stronger.
What you're actually doing is correlating the diffusal rate of the specific tea leaves in question inside the bag, and as they diffuse into the drink, you're correlating time as the cause, but actually it's the dissolving rate relative to that particular strain of tea bag. That's it.
No. That wasn't my hypothesis. That wasn't my question. My hypothesis was that leaving the tea bag in the cup for longer makes it stronger. My observation is that the longer the tea bag stays in the cup of tea, the stronger it is. My hypothesis is that leaving the tea bag in for longer makes it stronger. My test is to alter the amount of time that the tea bag is in each cup of tea.
But you know that it's the time it's causing the tea to dissolve or to diffuse into the water. The cause of it is the fact that it's soluble and you've poured water in.
That wasn't what I was testing for.
Yeah, but if you want to measure the effectiveness of it and claim that there's a perfect cup of tea out there, and you're claiming that time was the thing that did it, again, go back to what the independent variable is. It's the thing that you manipulated.
Time.
You're not Doc Brown. You can't manipulate time.
No,
manipulate.
Riley, that's wrong. You can manipulate time because you're changing the amount of time in the experiment. Therefore, you have manipulated time.
You're changing the duration of time, not time itself.
That is what time is. What is time? Time. How do you measure time? What's the shortest amount of time that you can have?
Time is a concept that we denote for our existence.
Time is not a concept. Time is a real thing. Time. There's something called the arrow of time. That time moves forward, and the passage of time is something that we can manipulate. The amount. We can't manipulate the physical passage of time, but we can manipulate the amount of time in an experiment, right? And that is what time is. Time is the passage of time. So if I am manipulating the passage of time, Riley, no, you're coming up with other causes for the experiment, which is the opposite of what you do with your egg thing. With your egg thing, you say, I put the salt in, that is the cause, and to assume any other cause is outside a scientific method. So in my teabag experiment, my cause is the amount of time, and to assume anything else, according to you, is outside of the scientific method.
But the thing is, I did manipulate something, right? I did some. I poured salt in, right? But in your case, what you've done is you've poured the tea bag into the water and watched the dissolution of the tea leaves.
And changed the amount of time that each cup has. What don't you get about that?
Craig, remember, again, I'm going to say it again, and then we might have to move on, just agree to disagree, because the hypothesis is a cause and effect relationship, right?
I went through that.
The cause of your perfect cup of tea wasn't the passage of time. It was you putting the tea bag in.
Yeah, but I need to manipulate the time to actually get the perfect amount of time for it to brew. Riley, my observation was that leaving the tea bag in for longer makes it stronger. All right?
Yeah.
From that observation, I have to follow the rest of it. Right?
Yeah,
that observation of leaving it in longer is what I then create my hypothesis around.
For the 5th time, and I could do what Tony Purcell did and lose my shit with you and swear at you. What you actually do in a scientific experiment is a hypothesis test where you establish the cause of an effect.
And now, that's what I'm doing.
The effect is the concentration of the strength of the cup of tea. But what's the cause? It's you putting the tea bag in. If you didn't put the tea bag in and then take it back out, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, but the amount of time is what I am seeing to make the perfect cup of tea. Riley, that's what you don't get. You are jumping from the observation to something else completely, right? My observation needs to then be what the hypothesis and that is based on. My observation, the thing that I am observing, is that leaving a tea bag in for longer makes the tea stronger. Therefore, my hypothesis is that leaving a tea bag in for longer, for a certain amount of time, will make a perfect cup of tea. So I need to create an experiment to test that. And how do I test to see what the perfect amount of time is? I manipulate time as the independent variable by changing the amount of time the tea bag is in each cup of tea.
Okay, so University of Southern California, independent variable is referred to the condition of an experiment that is systematically manipulated by the investigator. It's the presumed cause. The presumed cause in your tea bag, the concentration of your cup of tea, the presumed cause is you putting a tea bag in.
No, it's not. That wasn't my presumed cause. You're saying that, but my presumed cause was that the amount of time that it's left in alters the strength of the tea. You are changing what my experiment is.
Do you agree that time is a concept? Yes or no?
No, I don't agree that time is a concept. Time is something that can be measured.
Yeah, not passage of time. Time is a concept.
They're
the passage of time
They're the same thing, Riley.
They're not. Time itself is a concept. The passage of time exists.
Can you please show me a citation that says time and the passage of time are different things?
Say that again?
Can you show me a citation that says time and the passage of time are different things?
Well, time itself is conceptual. I think everybody understands that.
Well,
Do you not agree?
Can you give me a citation to back that up?
That time is a concept?
That time and the passage of time are different things?
Well, time is a scalar, and the passage of time is a duration. I mean, I don't really see how this is even contentious.
They're the same. Time, the passage of time is time. That's what time is.
No, the passage of time is not time.
No, it
time
is. Riley,
scalar.
Can you present me with a citation that says time and the passage of time are different things? And while you're at it, can you present me with a citation that says time cannot be an independent variable?
Yeah, because it can't be manipulated by the researcher.
Well, can you show me a citation that says time can't be an independent variable? Because I can show you hundreds of citations that says that it is. Sorry?
Can you manipulate time, or do you manipulate the passage of time?
That's what manipulating time is.
No, manipulating time is going back in time or going forward.
No, it's not. You're making that up. Yeah, you're saying that. That's not what it is. I've asked you if you can provide me a citation that says the time cannot be an independent variable. Can you do it? Because I can provide you with hundreds of citations that say the independent variable can be time.
Yeah, I know you can. I've done it myself on Google. The problem that you've got, Craig, is the definition of an independent variable. I've done 10 of them before, and I don't plan on going through them again. But you have to manipulate time itself, not the passage of time.
No, that's what you're manipulating. You're making that up, Riley. I'm sorry, but that's what manipulating time is altering the amount of time in an experiment. All right? And again, if you cannot present me with a citation that says that time cannot be an independent variable, then you have no evidence to back up what you're saying, and Hitchens Rager says I can dismiss your claim.
And okay, so then I'll have to cite my 10 citations that tell you what an independent variable is, and then you're going to have to try and work out, does it apply or not? Okay, so let's start with let's try number one.
No, Riley. If you can't provide me with a citation that says time cannot be an independent variable, then you have nothing to back it up. You citing what an independent variable is and not understanding it does not change the point that I can get many more citations than you that says time can be an independent variable. You have no evidence to say time cannot be an independent variable. Therefore, your claim is dismissed.
No.
Yes.
Let's go with it. Pick a number between 1 and 10, quick.
7.
Let's use number 7, right. Practical Physics, the Institute of Practical Physics, based in England. Independent variable, it says, the variable that is deliberately changed by the experimenter. Craig, what I want you to deliberately change, it's now 10 o'clock. I want you to go back to 9 o'clock for me.
That's not what that means. As an experimenter, I can manipulate the passage of time. And that's what that means. Oh. Your citation backed me up, Riley.
Yeah, but passage of time is not the same as time. Citation, you want time to be an independent variable.
Citation,
I want you to demonstrate that you can manipulate time.
Citation, you just made a claim, citation about that, please. If you're saying that time and the passage of time are completely mutually exclusive, I want you to back that up, or again, I'm going to dismiss your claim.
Just dismiss it and let's move on. You're a moron if you think time's an independent variable. But if you want to think that, you can...
Sorry, no, you are the one that likes citations, and you would not be able to find me a single citation that says time is not an independent variable. Why is it, Riley, that you will go with citations when they back you up, but when they don't back you up, you will fucking ignore them?
You can't manipulate time, Craig.
No,
you can
answer the question. Why is it when citations back you up, you're happy to use them, but why when they don't back you up, you completely ignore them?
I'm not completely ignoring them. I'm applying them, Craig.
No, get me a citation that says time can't be an independent variable then. Just one.
What?
Get me one single citation that says time cannot be an independent variable. Just one.
Well, Craig, can you manipulate time? Yes or no?
Absolutely.
No, you can manipulate the passage of time, but you can't manipulate time.
And that's what it means, Riley. That's what it means.
No, it doesn't mean that.
It does.
When it says time, it doesn't mean the passage of time. Otherwise, it would say passage of time. Now, if you're going to say that the passage of time can be an independent variable, I would say that's still not going to be an independent variable because it's a factor that may control...
Well, then you're redefining science at that point, Riley, because every citation in the world disagrees with you. So unless you can back up what you are saying, it means nothing. Time, in science, when it's used, 99% of the time is an independent variable. There are a few cases where it can actually be a dependent variable. But in science, when used, time is most of the time an independent variable. And you cannot get any citation that disagrees with that.
You can't manipulate time. That's
citation,
the answer.
Please.
It's in every citation for independent variable.
No, it's not.
It is every single definition for independent variable.
I've explained to you what manipulating time is. In my teabag experiment, I am manipulating time by adjusting the amount of time in the experiment.
You're lying, Craig.
No, I'm not lying.
And you are trying to mislead your audience.
Stop saying I'm lying. When I am telling you
Craig,
what
you're lying.
It's
a false statement of fact. You cannot manipulate time. You are not Doc Brown.
Get me one citation that says time cannot be an independent variable then. If you can, then your claim is dismissed. Right? You cannot back up what you are saying. End of story.
I am.
No, you're not.
I'm backing up. It's the definition of independent variable. Listen, any citation that you cite saying that time's an independent variable will be from a blog site written by somebody like M.
Let me see.
Find me an EDU citation with it then.
Sciencefair.math.lit.edu, nces.ed.gov, researchnet.gate.net, scienceline.ucsb.edu.
Put them on screen. Let's see the EDU ones, not the net ones, not the blogs, just the EDU ones.
All right, let's get this one up from... It's an EDU. It looks like it's actually for kids even. So let me just get that up so people can see that. 1 second. See, this is part of my problem, Riley, is that you guys insist on redefining what has already been defined in science.
Yeah, you can't manipulate time. You can only control the passage of time. I know you're conflating and trying to claim a victory. No, it isn't manipulating time. You don't understand what time is, Craig. It's a conceptual
do
scalar.
Understand. Why can't that come up?
No, you don't.
Sorry, just give me 1 second. I've lost my desktop capture. Alright, okay, I'll just get up the website. I'll post you the website so you can see it as well, Riley.
So whilst you're doing that, I'll just address Thinbox Dictator in my chat says, you were Googling stuff before, why don't you Google independent variable, you po chicken? Well, just for the benefit of that one guy, if you just slowly scroll through these are 10 citations of independent variable, and it tells you that you must be able to manipulate it. Now, time, by definition, is conceptual. It cannot be controlled by anybody but Doc Brown in the conceptual program called Back to the Future. So unless Craig is Back to the Future and Doc Brown, he can't manipulate time. He can control the passage of time, but he can't manipulate time. No matter how much he argues it, he can't.
Well, that's because you don't understand about time in an experiment, Riley. As I said, manipulating time is simply changing the amount of time that's in an experiment. That's
manipulating the passage of time.
Same thing. Time. I don't care how many times you say it's not, but you wanted definitions. And the first one that I sent you, it's sciencefair.math.iit.edu. If time is one of your variables, it is the independent variable. Time is always the independent variable. The other variable is the dependent variable. In our example, time is the independent variable and distance is the dependent variable.
Okay, so let's apply it, Craig. If time is one of your variables, it is the independent variable. So it's the cause of an effect. Let's see in this example, whatever the example is, let's see whether or not time caused whatever it says. Where is the example?
Well, it actually has that in it. Let me just get that up so I can see it full screen. So it says, how can I figure out which variable is independent and which variable is dependent? There are a couple of ways to think about it. The variable you started with is the independent variable. The variable you got as a result is the dependent variable. Which variable is input? Which variable is output? Input is the independent variable. Output is the dependent variable. Ask yourself the question, does variable 1 depend on variable 2, or does variable 2 depend on variable 1? This determines the independent variable. If time is one of your variables, it is the independent variable. Time is always the independent variable. The other variable is the dependent variable. In our example, time is the independent variable and distance is the dependent variable. Now, I think they're talking about a distance over time experiment.
What is their example? Do you know what their example is?
I think it would be in the page before this one. It's on that page before. They're talking about an experiment where they're using time, right?
Yeah, it'd be helpful if we need, because like you said with your teabag, right? Remember, a hypothesis is a cause and an effect relationship, right? You demonstrate the cause of an effect. Now your teabag, the cause of the teabag was you putting the teabag into the cup of tea and leaving it there for a period of time that you think is going to make you the perfect amount of tea. But it's the cause, right? You've put the tea bag into the water and allowed it to dissolve. You've controlled it. You were the cause.
Yeah, but I have changed the amount of time that the tea bag is in the water, Riley. Do you disagree with that?
Or passage of time. Yeah, okay, you can have passage of time. Right, but you haven't manipulated time.
That I have, because that's what it is. Right? What else have I changed in that experiment?
Craig, let's move on. We're not going to agree on this, are we? Let's move on.
Just one more question about it. In those 5 cup of teas, right? What is the one thing that I've changed? What's the only thing that's different in those 5 cup of teas?
You've put the tea bag in and you've left it in there for a period of time. The passage of time.
A different period of time for each one, right? So
time itself, passage of time.
But in science, time is the passage of time. That's what we're talking about. We are manipulating the amount of time in the experiment. So time, in that case, is the independent variable. But that was just one .edu example. I can get a lot more. I've got a list of them from scienceline.edu.
Craig, we don't agree, and I'll just concede for the sake of moving on. Time isn't an independent variable. It can't be manipulated.
Wait. You just said you concede, but then you said that it isn't. Do you concede or not?
Yeah, I'll concede. I want to move on. I want to get back to gravity.
Cool. As long as you understand that conceding means that you actually agree, that's cool.
No, not concede. Concede doesn't mean admit. I'll never agree that time is an independent variable. Well, but I'm not prepared to spend any more time on it because I'm not going to be up till 1 o'clock arguing.
You're going against every citation that I could find, but that's cool. But yeah, let's get back to actually gravity. Just before you do, I want to say there is 1,068 watching, which is very close to the record amount of people I've ever had watching. So thank you, everybody. If you do feel like it, Sleeping Warrior does have his own channel, and I will link that in the description of this. He has a lot of videos. That feel free to please go and check out Sleeping Warrior stuff. He has a lot of valid questions that people need to answer. So if you would like to check out Sleeping Warrior, you can find him just by typing Sleeping Warrior on YouTube, and I will put it in the description as well. But thank you everyone for watching. I really do appreciate it. Riley, gravity.
Gravity, right. So, Eddington experiment is, I think, where we got up to, and I asked you what was the hypothesis, or did I? No, I said it wasn't an experiment; it was an observation, and you said observational sciences are still science, or words to that effect.
An observation is an experiment.
An observation is that's that. All right, that's the first part of scientific method. Observe a naturally occurring phenomena. So we notice that there is some kind of light appearing from behind the sun. Okay, there's the phenomena. What causes it?
What causes the light from appearing behind the sun? Well, the hypothesis in that case was that the uneven distribution of mass, i.e., the planet in the sky, or sorry, whatever it was, the moon in the sky, the uneven distribution of mass was causing the light to follow the curvature of space-time. That was the hypothesis, right?
That was almost perfect, yeah. The uneven distribution of mass causes space-time to bend, and we perceive that through the bending of space-time, right? I can agree
in this case, we perceive that through seeing light in places we wouldn't expect to see it. So we perceive that by light bending.
Okay, and now I'm going to say, okay, so how did we prove that the cause was that, and it wasn't atmospheric refraction, or it wasn't like temperature or variables that we can't control? I mean, don't forget, Einstein's bending of the conceptual medium of space-time, it isn't just caused at the point that we observe the thing, it's caused continuously throughout the solar system on his model, right? So how can it be that it's the bending of the space-time that's caused it, and it's not some other bending of some other issue that's coincidental?
Well, you can rule out refraction by saying that normally, when you're looking at that spot, the star isn't in that position. So during normal, throughout the rest of the time, when the body isn't bending the light, the star is in one position. Only when that body is there does the light appear to bend. So you've ruled out atmospheric refraction because it never changes any other time. Can we agree with that?
No, not really. Atmospheric refraction is always there. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, and you can argue that it's non-existent at certain times of the day. Fine,
okay,
but how did you
prove...
prove...
looking straight up, what kind of atmospheric refraction would you expect?
Who cares? My point isn't about the rate. My point is about the point itself, that refraction itself is something that can influence the perception, right? Now, here's the thing. We have to manipulate the presumed cause to prove that it is the perception that we perceive, right? It is the cause of the effect. How did the Eddington experiment manipulate the independent variable?
By looking at that point in the sky at the stars when there wasn't a body warping the space-time.
Yeah, but that's correlative, though, isn't it? Correlation is not causation.
It's not. It's an observation, and as your screenshot says, that the intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study and structure and behaviour of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. Observations can be experiments. So the normal observation is that looking at those stars, when the body isn't there, they don't appear to be in a different place. The hypothesis is that when that body is there, the warping of space-time will make the stars appear to be in a certain position. Now, that's what they then observed. And that matched the predictions of Einstein's relativity.
Yeah, that's correlative. If it's matching the predictions, it's correlative, right? But we want to know the cause. So I'll say, just for argument's sake, let's just suggest that it might have been hyper-infrared magnetic distortion that caused it. And you're going to go, what? And I'm going to say, yeah, well, you can't prove that it wasn't. And you're going to say, yeah, well, it was exactly in line with Einstein's field equations or whatever. And I'm going to say, yeah, but you can't prove it. It's correlative. And it's affirming the consequence. You think that if Einstein's gravity is correct, then this star will appear at a certain time. Ooh, star does appear at a certain time, therefore Einstein is correct. And that therefore makes it an experiment. Craig, no, that's not good enough.
It's you say it's not good enough, but it really is. That's the thing. When there is no other explanation and it matches the predictions of the model, then that's at the point you start taking the model seriously and saying that maybe it's an accurate reflection of the things that we are seeing. And it wasn't just that one experiment. There's been many different experiments of relativity, to experimentally verify or disprove Einstein's theories. And every time they do an experiment, it turns out Einstein was correct, that his relativity, field equations hold correctly.
You keep using this word experiment, but there are no experimental tests that can validate or invalidate Einstein's.
I mean, I've just told you one. You
general.
can deny it's an experiment all you like, but that doesn't change the fact that it was.
No, there's no independent variable to manipulate, Craig. You're not going far enough. You're correlating. You're not manipulating. Now, you can claim that that is experiment, but it isn't.
I mean, you can keep claiming that, Riley, but again, you don't have any knowledge around science. You have a dictionary definition knowledge of science, which isn't appropriate to talk about the nuances of science. You don't understand that Einstein and Newton were literally talking about the same thing because it breaks down to the maths around it. And when you look at the maths and you then test the maths, it turns out right.
I can't, yes, because maths isn't part of science, Craig. It's observation and experiment. It's nowhere is maths mentioned.
Maths is the language of science, Riley.
No, it's not the language of science. It's the language of mathematics.
No, it's the maths is the language of science. It's how we describe things that are happening. It's how we mathematically
anywhere in
create.
scientific method where maths appears.
Well, maths is the language of science. I'm not saying it's in the scientific method. I'm saying maths is the language of science. You use maths to describe
scientific
things that you see.
Yeah, you can describe anything mathematically.
Yeah,
in science,
and maths is the language of science, and that's why that's what you guys forget and ignore. And this is where you fall apart in your Newton-Einstein thing, because when you break it down to the maths, they described exactly the same thing. And no matter how many times you say they didn't, you need to explain why you can derive Newton's law from Einstein's field equations if they're not describing the same thing.
If you give me a chance to respond, I can deal with everything that you say, Craig. The problem you've got with the Eddington experiment is it does not have an independent variable. It has a valid observation. It has a valid hypothesis, perhaps, if you can identify an independent variable. But as you can't manipulate the independent variable just because you've identified it, you can't manipulate it. It isn't an experiment. Now, you can bleat on as much as you want that it is, but it doesn't change the fact that there was no manipulation and it was simply an observation.
As I said, the independent variable is the time and place that you do it, Riley. It's really simple, and that is a valid independent variable, whether you deny it or not.
Time is a concept. Place is also a concept.
No, neither of them are concepts.
So when has place ever caused anything, Craig?
For instance, Tony's thing with the gravimetric meter. A different place on Earth is going to be an independent variable because it's going to cause a different result in the gravimeter.
Not gravity, not the pulling force of gravity, then, no?
That, again, you're not letting it go into the next explanation, right? So, yeah, the position on Earth is an independent variable, right? That's what you're manipulating to test the hypothesis of different density variations underneath you having a different result. So it all goes back to the pull of gravity. But the independent variable in that case is the position on Earth.
But there's only one independent variable, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean there can't be things behind the independent variable.
Well, it does, because if there's other things behind then you haven't got one independent variable. You have a correlation.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean you can't have things behind it. You can't say, right, like in your egg experiment, right? You add in the salt made the egg move, but there's more to it than that, right? It's not as simple as that is the cause. The salt was the cause. No, the cause was the manipulation of the variable in the buoyancy equation.
In the buoyancy equation, it's got little g, and the acceleration due to gravity would be a force, and we know gravity is not a force.
I've explained to you what it is. It's an emergent property.
What does that do to the equation for buoyancy, Craig?
Well, the g actually stands for an acceleration of gravity.
Yeah, the acceleration due to gravity.
Yeah, and the acceleration's there. That's what is in the buoyancy equation. The g stands for the acceleration due to gravity.
That's right. That's what I said.
Yeah.
So if you haven't got the acceleration to gravity, because
you do have the acceleration.
Craig, stop speaking over me, for God's sake. If you haven't got the acceleration due to gravity, because it's not a cause, it's an effect, then what does that do to the validity of your maths that you're applying for the buoyancy equation?
But you do have the acceleration due to gravity.
You do. You're breaking up badly. You do have the acceleration due to gravity. Yes. How does gravity accelerate something if it's the effect?
Oh my God! Have you not listened to the last hour and a bit we've been talking?
Well, we haven't really got to it. How does gravity cause something to happen if it's an effect?
I explained that to you because the effect of the warping of space-time makes things accelerate towards the larger mass. I explained to you in basic terms with a trampoline and a bowling ball.
Yeah, but it's not, when the warping of space-time occurs, it creates a change in the geodesic from our perspective. It isn't actually changing,
And that
it's still
causes an
traveling straight.
acceleration. Yeah, but then it causes an acceleration.
Not an acceleration, Craig. No, it's not an acceleration.
Oh, it absolutely is. You can't deny
listen.
there's an acceleration.
Listen, it's changing, it's warping space-time, right?
Which
And that
causes an
warping of
acceleration.
space-time creates the perception that there is a change in direction. There isn't actually a change in direction, Craig. It's perception only.
In general
Now,
relativity,
space-time-
the gravitational effects between masses are a consequence of the warping of space-time, Riley. That's what you're missing here. The gravitational effects, i.e. the acceleration that you see, are a consequence, an emergent property of the warping of space-time. You just bleeping out it's an effect, therefore it can't do anything, is moronic. The effect is that it causes an acceleration. That's what it does. It's fucking simple. I honestly don't know how you can't get this. Well, I do. I mean, you don't understand science, is basically. You don't understand physics. You haven't the slightest clue about physics because you've never taken the time to actually study physics. What you do is look at dictionaries and go, I know more than you because I think this definition means that. No, you don't know more about physics than any of us. Conspiracy Cast isn't lying. He is teaching children basic facts about the universe, and that is that we need to treat gravity as a force because there's a fucking acceleration there that makes an emergent force. It's simple. It really is.
Are you done?
Yeah?
You are done.
Yeah?
Right, you're choppy as hell, but I can make the gist out of what you're saying. The bending of the conceptual medium known as space-time causes what we perceive to be an acceleration. It's not actually an acceleration, Craig. It's a perception. Now,
No, it is an acceleration.
Space-time needs a definition because space-time itself is a concept. You know, like time, that's a concept.
It's not a concept, though. It's been experimentally demonstrated that relativity is real, so...
It hasn't. You claim it's been experimentally demonstrated. There is no experiment, Craig. You've got observations.
There's many, but we just went through one. There's many. I mean, we could talk about the GPS experiments with satellites. We could talk about the atomic clocks in planes, literally proving that, demonstrating that relativity is correct, that Einstein's theory of relativity works. There is so many experiments that show that relativity is a valid thing. And if general relativity is a valid thing, then Einstein's version of gravity is a real thing. And that means that the acceleration is there. Because Einstein built upon Newton that made an observation of that acceleration. They are the same thing, no matter how many times you deny it, Riley. They are exactly the same thing. Because mathematically, they describe the same thing.
Are you done?
Yeah?
Right, we need to drop this call and pick the call up again, Craig, because you're really inaudible on my side. You're very choppy. Can we disconnect and reconnect?
You sound fine of mine, and I'll disconnect and call you back. Oh, wow, guys, this is fun, huh? 1,064 watching. I don't know what to say.
Right, let's try that.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that sounds better.
Yeah, it's probably just Discord being dodgy.
Space-time, Craig.
Yeah.
It's a mathematical construct. It doesn't have any physicality. It doesn't exist in the real world. It doesn't exist in science. It only exists in mathematics. And in mathematics, by definition, because it's abstract, you can do anything you want with it. Now, if you think that space-time is physical, real world, you're going to have to demonstrate it. And there is no demonstration of space-time, Craig.
Apart from all the experiments that demonstrate relativity is correct, of course. I mean, you're going to... you're just going to deny that the experiments are there, but there is many experiments to demonstrate that relativity is a thing. There is. You're wrong, Riley.
Let me deal with them now, because you said a lot, and I'll let you speak, and I waited for you to finish. I'd expect the same courtesy in return. Mm-hmm. The Eddington observation has no independent variable. It doesn't prove cause and effect. The Cartesian clocks experiment that was done in planes that planes test, how did they prove that the cause of the time duration change was caused by time dilation?
You don't prove things in science.
What's the point in doing it then?
To disprove. You do know that, right? That science doesn't prove things.
Yeah, it proves the cause of an effect, Craig.
No. There is no such thing as scientific proof. You do understand that, right?
Have you got some other thing running in the background that's taking bandwidth? Because you're really choppy, Craig. Really choppy.
It might just be your end because you sound absolutely fine to me.
Yeah, you're coming through very choppy my end. It's okay. Let me see if I can do something to make quality of that. I'll drop that right the way down to there. Hopefully that'll improve. It might be me. I'm not sure whose fault it is. Right. What was it you were just saying then? I realise what?
That science doesn't prove things. There is no such thing as scientific proof.
Scientific method does demonstrate the cause of an effect. And if you're working within scientific method, by definition, you're doing science. If you work outside of scientific method, you're doing pseudoscience. It's in the definition. Yeah. I'm not going to cite it. I know that you know that.
Yeah, now, but like I said, you do know that science doesn't work with proof, though, right?
So what is the purpose of manipulating the independent variable if it doesn't prove the cause of an effect?
To try and disprove a hypothesis. Come on, Riley, this is basic stuff. If you don't know that science doesn't prove something...
Answer the question I asked. What is the purpose of manipulating the independent variable if you can't prove anything in science? What's the purpose of it?
To disprove a hypothesis.
No, you're not disproving a hypothesis.
That's what an experiment is for.
No, you're not trying to disprove a hypothesis in an experiment, you idiot. Why would you try
and... Riley, no. Here is a fact. If you are saying science proves things, then you are practicing pseudoscience. Science does not deal with proof. Proof exists in one place, and proof exists in mathematics. That's it.
Okay. So now we need a definition for... Right, PSU, pseudoscience.
Yeah, I know what the definition of pseudoscience is, but if you are saying that science proves things, then you are practicing pseudoscience. Because science doesn't prove things, Riley.
So you're a science denier, Craig.
No, you are. You are, because you're saying science proves things, and it doesn't.
Why are you talking over me?
Because you're wrong. Science doesn't prove things. Proof exists in maths, and that's it.
I might be wrong, but why are you talking over me?
Because you're just ignoring me.
I'm not. I'm disagreeing with you with citation to support my position that you are incorrect. You are demonstrating pseudoscience if you don't comply with scientific method. It's in the definition. Mm-hmm. Scientific method requires the manipulation of an independent variable to prove the cause of an effect. Now, it can be superseded with a refinement of somebody else doing a better experiment, but until that happens, you do prove the cause of an effect. Otherwise, there would be no reason to manipulate it, because you could just correlate everything.
Do me a favour, Riley. Just go and Google, is there such thing as scientific proof?
I just said that it could be superseded by a subsequent experiment that demonstrates something else.
No, just do what I've asked. Just go and Google, is there such thing as scientific proof?
I agree that you don't prove absolutely something, but in scientific method, you do prove the cause of an effect. So, for example, you can prove that at atmospheric pressure, water will boil at 100 degrees Celsius.
No, you disprove something else, Riley. Science does not deal with proof. It's as simple as that. There is nothing in science that deals with proof. Science is about disproving a hypothesis. Science does not prove, science disproves.
What's the point in not proving anything then?
You disprove things.
What's the point in disproving something?
To try and see if a hypothesis holds true.
So you're not trying to prove it, but you're trying to see if it holds true?
Yes, you're trying to disprove a hypothesis.
You're not. You're trying to prove the cause and effect. You don't understand what a hypothesis is.
You don't understand what science is, because if you say science proves things, then you are practicing pseudoscience. Proof exists in maths, and that's it.
Proof exists in maths? Maths is abstract. It has absolutely nothing to do with scientific method.
Proof exists in maths, and that's it.
No.
Oh, okay, it also exists in alcohol and baking bread, but no, science doesn't deal with proofs. It's as simple as that. If you are saying that, then you are literally practicing pseudoscience.
So the definition of pseudoscience on screen is a collection of beliefs or practices, in this case, mistakenly regarded as being based on scientific method. Now, within scientific method, we have an observed phenomena. We have a hypothesis. We have a null hypothesis. We have an independent variable that requires manipulation, and we have a dependent variable that requires observation to confirm that it validates the phenomena that you've seen. Now, if you follow those things, Craig, you do demonstrate the cause of an effect. That's what science does. It demonstrates.
It doesn't prove things, though, Riley.
Yeah, it does.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it does.
No,
if it didn't, Craig, you could just correlate anything like what they call a cockerel of a morning correlates with the sun rising, but it doesn't prove it. But if you don't prove that and you just correlate it, then you'll think that cockerels cause the sun to rise. You wouldn't want to believe that, would you?
I didn't realize it was as basic as you not realizing one very fundamental fact about science is that it doesn't deal with proofs. Proofs exist in maths and that's it. I.e. Newton's law of gravitational attraction. It's called a law because it's a mathematical proof of an observation. That's what a proof is. Proof exists in maths, not in science. It's not. Do you know what abstract means?
Do you know what abstract means?
Yes, I know what abstract means.
It wasn't a rhetorical question. What does abstract mean, Craig?
It means not. It means a concocted version of something.
Something that's abstract will be art. That it exists like within its own world, but it doesn't have any other purpose other than existing within its own world. It's independent, if you will. Maths is abstract, and yes, the maths always works out, but that doesn't mean that it correlates with reality unless you can prove that it causes something. And maths can't cause anything.
I'm not saying maths causes anything, but maths is where proof lives. Maths is what you use to prove something. Science isn't in the business of proving things. No matter how many times you bleat that, oh, you have to prove the cause and effect. No, science isn't about proving things. There is literally no such thing as scientific proof.
So tell me, Craig, what is the purpose of science if it's not about proving things?
To try and disprove a hypothesis. That's what the purpose of an experiment is.
Right. So if you're trying to disprove a hypothesis, you're never going to prove anything, right?
Yeah, because science doesn't deal with proofs. Science disproves things.
So then if you can't ever prove anything in science, then your concept of gravity or the whole thing to do with gravitational pulls of planets is never going to be proven, right?
But science doesn't prove things. We look at evidence and follow where the evidence
So why
gives us.
your science
all the evidence around gravity works out.
Craig, why is your science teaching children that gravity is a force when it isn't proven?
Because
sounds like child abuse to me.
Because we can measure, as I've explained to you, Riley, there is a calculable force. All right, whether that is a physical force or not is irrelevant. All right, but there is a calculable force. All right, that's
right. A calculable force doesn't mean it exists in reality. I can calculate anything, Craig. I can calculate the force required to remove the horns from your head. You don't have horns on your head.
Go on and do it.
Calculate it.
Go on, do it. You just said that you can calculate the force needed to remove the horns from my head. Can you please show me the maths behind that?
Yeah, so F equals ma. If I remove your horns at the rate of 8... What?
I don't have horns.
Yeah, exactly. So what if you can
mathematically prove it, can you?
Yeah, of course I can, because I can calculate the acceleration of the mass, the horns, and how
much do the horns weigh?
17 grams.
Right? But I don't have horns, Riley. All right? There is no horns
that's
there.
My point.
There is no horns there, so you can't calculate an acceleration or a force. But there is an acceleration in real life. There is an acceleration in real life that you can calculate a force from.
You've just hit the nail on the head. You don't have horns, right? But if I could calculate, if I really wanted to, the force required to remove them, right?
No, you couldn't, because I don't have horns. But I can calculate acceleration because there is an acceleration.
Listen, when you described that there was a mathematical force, that doesn't, or that you can calculate, that doesn't mean there's a force there in real world, Craig.
Riley, I have no horns. Therefore, there is no acceleration or mass that you can do a calculation based on. However,
Yeah.
there is...
Gravity doesn't...
Wait. However,
there's nothing to calculate for.
There is an acceleration, right? There is an acceleration, and things have mass. Therefore, we can calculate a force.
Give me an example of general relativity demonstrating an acceleration.
Give me an example of general relativity demonstrating an acceleration.
Yeah, so are we going to go with, let's say, the orbit of the moon and the...
Pick something up, anything that's in front of you, and let it go. There is my demonstration.
Yeah, so so you can calculate, because your mass has accelerated from a nil velocity, and it's accelerated up to, whatever, 9.8 meters per second squared. Because it's moving, you can calculate a force, right?
Yes.
Right. Does that mean, because you can calculate it, does that mean you can demonstrate it real world?
Yeah, absolutely. I can build something that can deal with a certain amount of force.
Okay, stop. Wait. So if you can demonstrate it real world, the force in this instance would be what?
It would be an emergent property of the curvature of space-time.
An emergent property of the curvature of space.
As
so
I've explained to you.
in general relativity, when you drop something and it starts to accelerate, the cause of that is defined and we know what it is, and I'm trying to get it from you, I'm trying to squeeze it from you, and you didn't give me the cause as within general relativity. Try it again and tell me what the cause is in general relativity.
I told you. It's the curvature of space-time caused by mass.
No. Yeah, the uneven distribution of mass.
Yeah.
The uneven distribution of mass.
As I explained, I gave the definition to you just now.
Yeah. So how would we demonstrate that the uneven distribution of mass did cause the acceleration?
By changing the mass.
Okay. So what mass might we change to demonstrate it?
You can change whatever mass you want.
No, we're talking about the cause of the change, the change in acceleration of the object that you've dropped. The change in acceleration.
You can change the mass underneath you by moving to a different place on Earth with known density underneath.
Oh, right, okay. So this is when we're back to our friend, Tony Purcell. Now, when you do that, you also change pressure, you also change temperature, you also change humidity.
Yeah.
How would you keep them
taken into account for?
How are they taken into account?
Well, a gravimeter is a self-contained device, for a start. And
it's still subject to pressure changes, and it's still subject to humidity changes, and it's still subject to temperature changes. And what's it on pressure? So how would you say it's self-contained?
All of those things would be taken into account in the device. It knows forces that are applied. It knows resistances due to temperature.
Bollocks.
How is it bollocks? How is it bollocks? You can measure the temperature where you are. And then you can do a calculation based on kinetic energy to see how that would affect the elasticity of the spring.
Yeah, but the pressure is also changed.
Then you record the barometric pressure, and then you do a calculation how that would affect the
and then the humidity of the atmosphere.
Yeah, and then you can do a calculation based on the humidity and how that would affect the device, Riley.
Right. So now you've got three things that you can't control, and you can try and control them, but you're not going to get them the same. But you've got three things there, plus a fourth, which is supposed to be the Earth. You've now got a correlation. You haven't got a cause.
No correlation. What you miss is that the effects of things like humidity and pressure and temperature are known. We know how energy is transferred between things. So we can do calculations based on the temperature, humidity, and pressure to then remove those from the equation. And then when you get what's left, the calculable force that shows you there's different densities underneath, and again, this works. Because Tony gets paid a fucking shitload of money to actually do this and find shit for people. So it works.
Well, it's not science though, Craig. It's mathematical corrections and calculations based on correlative effects that he believes he's observing. It isn't science. Technology.
It's not science, but it is.
It isn't, Craig. He hasn't got an independent variable to manipulate.
Yeah, the position on Earth that he's on.
Right, positions on Earth are not a cause in a scientific test. In the same way that time is an independent variable,
and it is the cause of a different effect. If the different positions on Earth have a different density distribution underneath, then that is going to be the cause of the effect of the spring moving differently, isn't it?
But do remember that he was describing gravitational as gravity as a pulling effect at the beginning of the handout.
Yes, he was talking about Newtonian classical physics because, as George Musser said, in general use, we have to think of it as a force. Because if I was to build...
We must think of Newtonian gravitation as a force.
So
that doesn't mean it necessarily is a force, but we don't need to work at the really is level.
Absolutely.
That was the full citation.
Absolutely. And if I build a bridge, Riley, do I ignore the calculable force when I'm taking that into account? Or do I calculate that force when I'm taking into account how I'm building the bridge?
If we're not working at the really is level, Craig, what level are we working at?
Answer the question, Riley.
Because I want to go back to the point. If he's working on Newtonian principles that are outdated...
Come on, answer my question first. It's a very simple question.
It's not a fucking force, is it, you idiot?
Okay, so I'm just going to ignore that calculation when I'm building a bridge, am I?
Yeah, it's not a force.
Right, so let me just clarify this. You're saying if I build a bridge, I am to ignore the acceleration due to gravity.
Correct.
Right, okay, I'm fucking glad you don't build bridges, because you would kill people.
Oh,
you
really?
have to take it into account, Riley. You physically have to take it into account when you're building things. If you don't, they don't work. You have to take the acceleration due to gravity into account when you're building bridges, buildings, boats, planes, anything. If you don't take
there is
it into
no
account,
acceleration due to gravity, Craig. You can bleat it as much as you want.
You go and fucking build a bridge and you ignore the acceleration based due to gravity, and see how many people sue you when you die, when they die. All right, you have to take it into account, and you need to explain why engineers do take it into account when building stuff.
They don't. They just build it, Craig. They design it, build it, and if it falls down, they try and find out what causes it.
I'm a fucking nuclear engineer. You absolutely do take the acceleration due to gravity into account when you are building things.
There is no acceleration due to gravity, Craig.
Then why do engineers take it into account? You can't say they don't, because they do.
They take it into account mathematically, not in the real world. There is no consideration in the real world. You build a bridge, it'll either stand up or it won't.
If they don't take it into account, then the calculations around the bridge won't be correct, and it will fall down and people will die. What don't you understand?
Right. Have you got any evidence where somebody has not taken into account gravitational pull and then the bridge just fell down?
Every single bridge ever that is made is created using in modern engineering anyway, if they want to calculate the loads that the bridge is able to take, they have to take the acceleration due to gravity into account for their calculations. They have to.
Do you have any evidence where somebody did not take into account the gravitational acceleration and the bridge fell down?
No, because they do it.
No. Have you got any evidence where somebody did not take into account the acceleration due to gravity and the bridge fell down? Yes or no?
No, because they do take it into account. And there is an architect in my chat, Frank Bauer, who I've spoken to before, says, I'm an architect and FTFE is absolutely right. Riley, the fact is engineers do take it into account. If they don't, their calculations are not correct.
Yeah, who cares about the calculations? Unless you can demonstrate that somebody did not take into account the effect of gravitational acceleration and the bridge fell down, you haven't got any evidence to support your assertion. And if we're going to apply
Hitchens razor actually backs me up, because the evidence supports my suggestion that engineers use the acceleration due to gravity in their calculations. Hitchens razor supports me. I would ask you to show me a bridge that was built not using the acceleration due to gravity as a calculating factor in the load-bearing properties of the bridge.
Hitchens razor states that assertions that are made without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
And my assertion has evidence. My assertion is that every engineer that builds a bridge uses the acceleration. No, you're misquoting me, Riley. You're misquoting me. Right?
I'm not misquoting you.
The acceleration due to gravity it's something that engineers will take into consideration. All engineers take this into consideration. That is my evidence. Therefore, Hitchens razor applies to me. You are making the claim that it is not taken into account. So I would ask you to get a citation or an engineer that does not take the gravitational acceleration due to gravity into account whilst building a bridge. Otherwise, you do not have evidence for your claim it is not taken into account.
Are you done?
Yeah. I'm right, you're wrong.
Right, don't interrupt me, Craig. I'm losing my patience with you. It's not on. I haven't interrupted you. I've kept my mouth shut and I've allowed you to spiel your bullshit every single time.
Well, if you can get me one architect that does not consider the force of gravity, you might have a claim. No.
Shut up.
Find me an engineer that backs up what you're saying.
Craig, shut the fuck up. Your claim was that engineers always take into account gravitational acceleration, because if they don't, the bridge would fall down. I want to see evidence where somebody did not take into account gravitational acceleration in the mathematics, but the bridge fell down. If you don't have evidence to show that, then your claim is dismissed. Your assertion is dismissed.
I do have evidence to show that, because my claim is that engineers take the acceleration due to gravity into effect. Stop. There are no bridges. There are no bridges that people
they did not take into account gravitational acceleration. The bridge would fall down, and everybody would sue them.
Absolutely.
So let's see that evidence to support that claim, then, please.
Every single architect and engineer in the world is my evidence.
So does every single architect and builder build bridges where they don't take into consideration a gravitational acceleration and they all fall down?
No, because they don't do it.
Right. Because that was your claim.
No, my claim is that they have to, Riley.
Getting stupid, Craig. This is getting stupid.
No, your claim was that they don't take it into account, right? That was your claim, yeah?
No, your claim was that, not mine. Your claim.
No. Your literal words that engineers don't take gravity into account. That was your words, right?
No, your words were, Craig, every single engineer takes into account acceleration to gravity, because if they didn't, the bridges would all fall down.
Absolutely.
That isn't true.
Yes, it is.
Right, so where's the evidence that that's true?
Every engineer taking gravity into account.
Right, show me the evidence show me the engineers that did not take gravitational acceleration into account and the bridges fell down.
There is none, because they built the bridges properly.
So you can't do it then, can you?
I can back up my claim that every engineer and architect in the world that builds bridges and buildings and etc. use the force of gravity as a calculation when taking into account the load-bearing properties of things they are building. Your claim, Riley, your claim was that no, they don't take it into account.
Craig, gravity isn't a force. You said every single engineer takes into account gravitational acceleration, because if they didn't, the bridges would all fall down.
Absolutely.
Show me any engineer where they did not take into account gravitational acceleration and the bridge did actually fall down. If you don't have evidence for that, you can scrub the assertion you made.
No, my assertion stands because every engineer in the world uses gravitational acceleration. And again, was the one with you.
Whatever. Let's move on.
Right, Riley.
Let's move on.
No, you were the one with the claim that engineers do not take it into account, right?
Space-time is a concept in the same way that math and time doesn't exist, Craig. It only exists in math.
No, it's been experimentally demonstrated, Riley.
It hasn't been experimented. You don't know what an experiment is, Craig.
It absolutely has been experimentally demonstrated. No matter how many times you bleat about it not being done, it has been done.
It hasn't. You don't know what an experiment is. Yes, it requires manipulation of an independent variable. You can't do that with anything to do with gravity in terms of either Newtonian or Einsteinian.
Yes, you can.
No, you can't. Craig, by definition, space-time is conceptual.
No, it's not.
What is it called?
It's been experimentally demonstrated. Riley,
Craig,
it's been experimentally demonstrated, therefore it is not conceptual.
It hasn't been. Stop lying about experiments.
I'm not lying. You're lying. You're being a fucking retard here. All right? Stop it.
No. Experiment means observation and manipulation of the presumed cause, Craig. It doesn't just mean observation.
Incorrect.
Stop lying.
Stop trying to define science with dictionaries. You don't know what you're talking about. I studied physics. You didn't.
Can you prove that you studied physics?
Yes, I absolutely can.
How?
Because I've got a fucking degree in it.
Can you prove it?
Well, you want me to go and get my certificates that are probably with my mum in Bristol?
So that would be a no.
But it's irrelevant to the conversation. I understand physics because I've studied it.
But you seem to be denying the need to manipulate the presumed cause, the independent variable.
And again, I'm the one that studied physics, and I'm the one that's done experiments, Riley. When have you ever done a proper science experiment? You haven't. You poured some salt in it and some water and presumed the cause. That's what you did. You practiced pseudoscience.
Are you done? Are you denying
pseudoscience?
Are you denying the need to manipulate the independent variable in an experiment? Yes or no?
No, I'm not. And I'm saying the independent variable in the experiments around relativity has been manipulated.
Right. So what was manipulated in the Eddington experiment?
I've already told you this.
It was observed. Nothing was manipulated.
And the time that it was observed in was an independent variable.
No, time's not an independent variable, right? So
Incorrect.
obviously we're not.
No. You can't say time isn't an independent variable unless you can find me a citation to back that up.
You can't manipulate time. We're not going through this again. Craig, space-time, by definition, is a concept.
No,
what
it's
is it
experimentally
called?
Demonstrated. End of story.
Craig, no, you say that it hasn't. It's pseudoscience. Craig, what is it called
it has
when
been
you
demonstrated?
It hasn't. You're lying, Craig.
No,
there was no experiments with a valid manipulation of a valid independent variable with general relativity.
According to you, who's never studied science or physics in his life, so it would be understandable that you don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, so space-time is a concept, Craig. It doesn't actually exist other than in mathematics.
You can keep saying that, but you're wrong.
What is it called when we try and bring into the real world a concept?
Well, you're trying to talk about the reification fallacy, aren't you? But
correct.
Space-time isn't a concept, so it's irrelevant. And if you are talking about reification fallacy, may I point out that reification fallacy is irrelevant in science?
What the fuck are you talking about?
Do you want to get up the normal definition? You bring up the Wikipedia definition of reification fallacy, don't you? Can you bring that up?
Well, I just normally just type in, because they're generally all the same, but space-time... Right,
no, we're talking about reification fallacy now.
Reification.
You normally go with the Wikipedia definition of it, right?
I just go to one of the general... Yeah, okay, we'll go with reification.
Cool, right. So let's go to the Wikipedia page for reification fallacy, shall we? And I'd like you to go down to the section that is titled Use of Constructs in Science.
Hang on. Let's, for the dumb people in your chat, let's read what it says. It's a fallacy of ambiguity when an abstraction, which is an abstract belief or hypothetical construct, that would be space-time, is treated as if it were a concrete, real event or physical entity. That would be gravity. Where did you want me to go?
So well, you're wrong with your assertions about it being conceptual, but that's irrelevant. I'd like you to go down to the section that says use of constructs in science. And I'm going to read from here.
Hang on, let me first. Yeah, okay, use of constructs in science, yeah.
So the degree to which a construct is useful and accepted as part of the current paradigm in the scientific community depends on empirical research that has demonstrated that a scientific construct has construct validity. Thus, in contrast to Whitehead, many psychologists seem to believe that, if properly understood and empirically collaborated, the reification fallacy applied to scientific constructs is not a fallacy at all. It is one part of the theory creation and evaluation in normal science. Sorry, but in science, the reification fallacy is not relevant.
Hang on. Craig, you seem to have missed the important bit there. See, in the square brackets, what's it say in the square brackets?
Citation needed?
Yeah. So if there's not a citation to support the assertion, what does Hitchens' razor do to that assertion?
Wait, no, Righty, this is from the definition that you keep bringing up.
Yeah, but I don't bring this part up because it hasn't got a supporting citation. But you've now made the citation, is there a citation? Is there a citation that says...
no, if you're using this page as evidence of a reification fallacy,
no,
in that same page, it actually talks about the fact that...
Craig, you told me to come here, and I did. And then you've cited something that needs a citation, and that means that you've then cited it, and I'm asking you for the citation that we know doesn't exist. What does that do to your assertion? Bye-bye.
Not much, because this is the evidence that you normally use, but bear with me 1 sec. I remember reading a paper about this. If you just let me get it up. Is that it?
When an abstract belief or hypothetical construct known as space-time is treated as if it were a concrete real event or physical entity, gravity. Craig, gravity is a reification fallacy. It does not exist. It has no experimental
gravity is not a reification fallacy because a reification fallacy is when you treat a model or something or a mathematical concept as real. We are not saying that gravity is just a mathematical concept. You are the ones that say that. We are saying that gravity is a demonstratable, experimentally evidence-capable part of our universe. All right. Now, bear with me while I get the citation that you need, because I have found it before.
So whilst you're looking for it, by definition, space-time is a concept. And by any definition you wish to go to, if you have an abstract belief or a hypothetical construct, space-time If it's treated as though it was the real thing called gravity, that is reification. It's logically fallacious, Craig. There's no getting way around it. It's nonsense. There's no science.
It's really not. There is science to support it. You claiming it's not and bleating Riley, you are using reification fallacy wrong. And in general, in science, talking about when you're having a discussion about science, citing a bunch of fallacies is in itself a fallacy. But you are using reification fallacy wrong. A reification fallacy is when you treat a model or a mathematical construct as real. We are not doing that because we are saying we can experimentally demonstrate what we are saying. Therefore, it is not just a mathematical construct.
You can't expect. You don't understand what experimentally demonstrate means.
No, Riley, you don't have any qualifications to say I don't understand what an experiment is. I've studied physics. But you haven't. I can tell you what an experiment is.
Claim qualifications, and I've asked you for supporting evidence of it, and you haven't got it. So until you do, then you can't claim that either.
You don't get to tell me what an experiment is when I'm the one that has studied physics for most of my life. I'm the one that demonstrated what I know by being a nuclear engineer in the Royal Navy. I'm the one that went to university whilst I was in the Navy and studied and spent a lot of my life studying, okay? You have
evidence to support your assertion that you got a physics degree, yes or no?
Not with me right now, okay? But that is irrelevant to the conversation, right? I understand physics and you don't, Riley. You have never studied physics in your life. Therefore, you are the one that does not know what an experiment is, not me.
So by virtue of your self-proclaimed status as an undergrad in physics holding a degree, that means that you outrank me academically in physics, therefore you win. Is that the way it's going?
No. What it means is that you aren't allowed to redefine science and tell people that understand science what an experiment is. You and the rest of the flat earthers have you and the rest of the flat earthers have no scientific experience. You have none at all. All of your knowledge about science comes from skimming articles and trying to look at definitions of words. And that is not what science is about.
Do you know what an appeal to accomplishment fallacy is, Craig?
Yeah, it doesn't apply here.
Really? Yeah, tell me what an appeal to accomplishment.
Riley, you're starting to go down the fallacy route, and I'm just going to ignore it. All right.
Well, then we're at the end of the conversation, then, aren't we? Because if you're going to say my dick's bigger than your dick,
right. Before you go, I need to ask. Someone has asked me a question for you. Did you buy subs? I'm just asking for people to know. Did you pay a company to give you subs and likes?
No, I didn't. But Craig, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the point of the conversation that we're now at, which is basically you saying that I don't have an opinion in science because I did not study physics. Therefore, you win by default.
No. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you don't get to redefine science when you have never studied science.
I'm demanding that you stick to the definitions of words, and you don't want to do that for some reason. And I would say
I'm actually talking about science, and you are making up stuff like you not knowing what natural means in science is fucking ridiculous.
No matter how you describe it, Eddington does not have an independent variable that was manipulated.
No matter how many times you say that, he did have.
He didn't know. There was no independent variable manipulation in Eddington.
You're just wrong. Just go and look at the experiment. He had an independent variable. No matter how many times you say he didn't, he absolutely did.
Okay, so in the Cartesian clocks and the atomic clocks thing in the planes, what was the independent variable that was manipulated to prove the cause of the time dilation in the planes?
Height and speed of planes.
Right, they're not independent variables to prove the change. You have to manipulate the time to the time was changed.
No. Do you even know what time dilation is and how it happens?
Lorentz contraction, consequent. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, you're going to say Lorentz contraction, but you don't know what it means.
There's no evidence anywhere of a physical change in size, the result of a Lorentz contraction. It's completely fallacious. It's another reification fallacy.
Fallacy. Stop doing the fallacy. It's pointless.
Okay. Craig, we're basically done. I'm 4 minutes short of what the time is, but we're at the point where everything that you say that I do is fallacious because I'm pointing out the errors in your science.
There is no errors in my science. That's the thing. There is none. Riley, I have told you the scientific standing. You can ignore it and deny it all you want, but I have explained to you your misconceptions about science, your misconceptions about time being an independent variable, about not being able to do certain things that you certainly can, about not knowing what the word natural means in science. That is your problem. You don't understand what you're talking about. If you went and took a basic physics course, you might understand a tiny little bit of it.
Thank you very much for your time, Craig. Have a great day.
See you later. Well, guys, that was something, wasn't it? And can I fucking say, 1,150 of you watching. Wowzers. I wanted Riley to come on so I could just basically get him to say a bunch of stuff that is wrong. He doesn't understand science in the slightest. It's as simple as that. He doesn't understand what the words around science even mean. He tries to use dictionaries to define what science is, and that's not what science is. Science is about having fun. No, it's not. Science is about, I don't know why I said having fun. I was looking at a different thing there. Science is about trying to disprove a hypothesis. Science is about trying to explain the natural world through experimentation and observation. And he just denies so many areas around science. And that's the thing. The conversation with him will go nowhere because he's going to stick to his guns about the things that he's got wrong. Right, apparently Riley didn't get over 100 watching and I had 1,150. Right, now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to quickly read out the members that I got and anything that came in via PayPal. And then we're going to stop this stream and we're going to start up a after show. And we're just going to talk about what's happened. So there's a bunch of new members. Thank you very much. We've got the Shark Father, Outlaw Jer, JL Truth, Otakeji. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. Epic P Funk 95, John Watson upgraded to Destroyers, and then Tim Pryor. Thank you everyone for becoming members. It means the absolute world to me. Now let me go to PayPal and see what's come in here. Oh, if it lets me. Okay. Oh, we've had a few things come in. I don't know if I can read messages with those. I don't know if there is messages. Okay. All right, we've got Crafty Keela for £5 says, love you, mate. Have fun playing with Riley. That was fun. That's one of them. Let me just read out the others. We got... I don't want to read out your name in case I'm doxing you, but initials AS. 20 Australian dollars says, Leaky Warrior is such a little bitch. He wouldn't talk to you until you got a boost from Simon Dan, and only if you don't make money. Well, fuck you, Riley. I want to show my support for your entertainment. Much love, Nerthan. Thank you very much, Nerthan Termson. Do appreciate it. There's a couple more. Again, I don't want to dox you, but initials SA says, space-time is cool. LIGO, the double slit experiment. It's all amazing stuff that blows your mind when stoned. Love watching theoretical physics stuff like Brian Greene, Max Tigamak, Michigan Kaku, and all the rest. All the best. Thank you very much. £2. And then we've got one more, I think. Yeah, and we've got again. I don't want to dox you. Initials JE. Says, so you get more viewers when you stream at a Europe-friendly time? Well done in the debate. Now opinion, thank you very much. Yeah, I think this was because people have been wanting to see Riley. Honestly, guys, I can't believe there's 1,000 of you watching right now. It's absolutely amazing. But why don't you all, in about 10-15 minutes, come back and join in the after show. I'm going to see if we can get a few people on and have a chat about what's just happened. I had a great time talking to Riley. He stayed decent for most of it, I guess, so... fair play to him for that. He is willfully ignorant, though, and ignores what actually science is and tries to add things to science that doesn't need to be added. Premature outro there, dope. Yeah, he adds things that don't need to be added to science. Why have I disappeared? There we go. He adds things that don't need to be added to science and just demands that he's right when he's got no actual knowledge around science. But anyway, come back in about 10-15 minutes. Remember, stupidity is not a right. Fight the flat earth. Fight the flat. 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 Fight the flat.